So yes, I'm here with Ian, and we read, or I read part of a 1969 interview in Playboy with Marshall McLuhan. And today we're going to go off on that and just kind of talk about how technology has influenced human history and is currently doing so and is likely to do in the future, including individual psychology and kind of the attitude that we might have towards it. And Ian, would you like to kind of introduce some interesting parts from McLuhan, and we'll kind of go from there?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I first heard about him um maybe a couple decades ago, the early 2000s. I was doing a lot of like I don't want to say cutting edge web stuff, but blogs were new and people were sort of discussing what it was still the World Wide Web and like all that stuff, the sort of like generation of ideas and things. And so his name came up a lot. He's famous from the 60s and maybe the 70s. He was a media theorist. Somewhat interestingly, he was a professor at the University of Toronto, which seems to be a general theme. Um,
Like John Vervaeke and
Vervaeke and Peterson both. Exactly, exactly. Um, and yeah, so his focus was media, and at the time he had this sort of similar somewhat to John Vervaeke and Jordan Peterson. He was this professor who was also popular on the cultural circuit, let's say. I think he shows up in a Woody Allen movie. There's a song by somebody that was on Laugh-In, which was like a big show in the 60s. It was Marshall McLuhan, what are you doing? Was like the repeated refrain through the song. So people, the culture generally knew who he was, and everybody was kind of confused by him. Some of the things that he has said, and this is from the introduction to the interview, which I will emphasize. It's an interview with him by Playboy. It's widely available on the internet. You can search it. There's no risk of running into anything NSFW. It's nicely curated PDFs, but it's from 1969. So just keep in mind that like everything I have of what he has said is from, nearly, what is that? 50, 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago, 55, 60 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, so a couple of the things he has said that have confused people, he'll say things like the electric light is pure information. Um, or people don't actually read newspapers. They get into them every morning like a hot bath. Um, which I think of it as sort of a poetic um, evocation of awareness and attention around our ways of interacting with media. He uses the word media in a way that I think we more accurately, well, I'm not saying we're more accurate than him, but it's more accurate to say that we use the word technology. So it's
Hmm.
any form of constructed way of changing how the human body interacts with the environment.
Hmm.
So he talks about clothing as a media. He talks about the wheel as a media. Newspapers, obviously, the phonetic alphabet as a
Hmm.
particular form of language of structure and what it does to sort of centralize the visual field and the visual
Hmm.
processing field.
Hmm.
Which I don't know if we're going to get into all of that, but it's very interesting stuff. I highly recommend the full interview. But the part that I wanted to pull as one of the parts I wanted to pull as particularly relevant to our sort of current cultural situation um, is a quote from towards the end where the interviewer is asking him about his view of the future. Is he optimistic? Is he pessimistic? Does he think because he well actually I'll give a little more background first just to explain. Um, he was sort of the originator of the term the global village,
Hmm.
I believe.
Hmm.
And his take on it was that in sort of pre-literate and not necessarily um this is difficult language. Um pre-writing system.
Hmm.
So like, but pre specifically, he's specifically hung up on the phonetic alphabet.
Mm.
And for him, there's something about letters that are very simple and not evocative of an image, akin
Mm.
to, the Egyptian hieroglyphs or the, Chinese and other Eastern Asian writing systems where the pictographs, they're much
Mm.
more, they bring in a lot more of the world. The more westernized alphabet, the way he describes it is you're only focused on like the shape of the letter. You're not trying to evoke anything, any other senses. It's just purely the visual, the focal point. Everything else kind of fades away. And from that pure visual relationship, you are able to store and retrieve a lot of information and pass it on in ways that maybe you couldn't before. Now, the hieroglyphs or the pictograms do the same thing, but they don't in that they store information and you can retrieve it, but they don't limit you to the visual field nearly as strongly as the phonetic alphabet does, because they bring in, a sense of the world. That there are certain pictograph, like in Chinese, there's certain things that look like a mountain or certain things that look like a man, and they're sort of symbolized in that way, especially, going back to the time we're talking about when language was first invented.
Mm.
Um, maybe not today. You're not going to necessarily see a mountain on a Chinese, internet site. You're not going to see that and think mountain, but he might argue that you would. I don't
Mm.
know. Um, but in any case, the point being that overemphasis on the visual system strengthens that part of our mind, and it weakens our ability to also tune into like the auditorial system, the taste, the touch, the smell. Like it unbalances our total gestalt involvement with the environment.
Mm.
And I think here we come into similar thinking of Ian McGilchrist's The Master and His Emissary, where you have the left brain being very broken down and focused and separated into parts, and the right brain being very more holistic and all-encompassing. I think you can map that pretty clearly onto McLuhan's kind of phonetic alphabet and what it does, the visual field, and then the pre-literate, um, pre-alphabetic, sort of more he would call it a tribal element, tribal atmosphere, where if you go to a people who still live that village lifestyle, that tribal lifestyle, here we run into Rousseau as well. Um, there's this sense of them not having a strong core identity of who they are outside of the environment of their community,
Mm.
outside of the environment of the land. They're much more their own sense of self and existence is woven in throughout the land and throughout each other. And to him, that's the village. And to him, that's tribal life. That's what he proposed electronic media, which for him was mostly television and starting computers. He was aware of computers. I don't think they were anywhere near what we have today. And his opinion of television is interesting as well, but I'll leave that aside. But these electronic media, he says, they bring back more of our senses. So it's not just the black and white of the page. We have the visual, we have the audio. There's a level of interaction, um, and you can pick holes in all of his arguments kind of easily. Like, oh well, but you're not involving the body, the television. You're just sitting there, like, and that's true. But he's sort of his things are very gestural. So it's sort of like if you can understand the gesture that he's trying to make, and you can see if you can apply the gesture, it doesn't necessarily matter so much whether you can also poke holes in it, because if you apply it and it reveals something useful to you, then who cares about the gesture? You got something useful out of the interaction. So that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to do by referencing him. Um, but he so anyway, to return to the interview, they're sort of asking him like, "Oh, you're predicting uh, this sort of pulling away from the separated analytical, individual, uh, phonetic sense of the world, this visual sense of the world. You're predicting a turning towards more of a tribal, acoustic, global village. We're all sort of in our own little tribes, communicating and trading with each other, in on the level of ideas, rather than one homogenous culture. There's this sort of wide thing.
Mm.
And he says, it's hard to pin down. He's he says he claims the transition is going to be really painful, particularly
Mm,
for societies like the United States that are very much he says the United States is the first nation that was formed entirely upon that sort of individualized worldview, that sort of like
mm,
separated analytic worldview,
mm,
um, which harkens back to the Enlightenment and the 1700s and all of that.
mm,
Um, and that it's that the breakdown of the way the new media will break down our sense of the individualistic self and how we will sort of blend and tribalize into these groups and lose our sense of identity, and there will be these identity crises.
mm,
And I'm just I'm amazed that he's describing 2020 to 2025 in 1969 and he has no idea, right?
mm,
And but he also has this very hopeful view of the future that the media, these new technologies themselves will um, sort of smooth the transition as people, to the extent that we become conscious and engaged in them and sort of choose where they go and see what they're doing to us. Um, we sort of provide ourselves with a more hopeful future. The more engaged, the more consciously engaged we are in the process, the less it will be done to us.
mm,
And to that end, I would like to read the quote that I sort of started this whole thing with, um, where he's talking about this sort of attitude of how to approach the new technology, the new media, and the sort of new electronic world.
mm,
And he says, it's vital to adopt a posture of arrogant superiority against the media's effect upon us. Instead of scurrying into a corner and wailing about what media are doing to us, one should charge straight ahead and kick them in the electrodes. They respond beautifully to such treatment and soon become servants rather than masters. And I just think whether it's cell phones, smartphones, or artificial intelligence bots, um, that's probably a good attitude to have.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, this is a very fascinating topic, very complex, obviously. I like what you said that the quotes that you gave, like people don't read the newspaper, they enter into it like a warm bath every morning, something like that, are tend to be kind of poetic and that they sort of gesture towards something that I might be kind of combining two things that you said
No,
with.
you're spot on. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you take for it what is useful, not necessarily try to poke holes in it or to see if it's absolutely true. Um, this reminds me of one of, I think, John Vervaeke's arguments that a lot of the reason why our we have the meaning crisis is because we're looking for absolute logical certainty in something, and that sort of narrows our minds and narrows our communication and our, you know, everything, sense of the divine, sense of ourselves, connection to others and the world. Um, yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure what to say besides that. It's just such a complex topic. I guess I'm still at a loss as to where to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you said, I was gonna not try and jump on that too quickly, but I like what you said with Vervaeke, the idea of the sort of the search for absolute truth, um, kind of limiting what we're capable of allowing into our system.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what McLuhan is talking about when he talks about the visual culture. I mean, if you think about it, like it, if every experience we have leaves some impression on us that goes on to flavor or color our life going forward. So, it's kind of basic evolution. You put enough pressure on a system, the system will move in a certain way.
Mm,
Um, if we spend so much of our time and derive so much of our meaning looking at black print on a white page, um, and the print itself, maybe it's illustrated, but the print itself where we derive, we focus our attention and we look and we look and we look and we look and okay, that's the sentence, that's the statement. Like that already inclines our whole system to look for black and white, to look for absolute truth, to look for okay, but
Mm.
can you specifically put it in this phrase? Like how do you capture it? There's not a lot of nuance. You McLuhan might argue that if you were to use printing in books, if you were to use gradations of color, so it wasn't just black and white, but like important words were darker and other words were lighter in that poetic sense, that you might actually uh, change the elements that we're looking at,
Mm.
Um, whether that's true or not, I feel like what it points to is a visual example. You can imagine black and white text on a page. You can imagine, oh, well, this word is lighter and like, oh, that does something different to my mind. And as I'm reading, I get one level of information from the black and white. I get another level of information from the black to gray. I get another level of information from the actual letters and what they mean. Um, and the more parts of our brain that are involved in taking in the information, the more that information the more parts of our brain are fed by that information and kind of changed by it. But when we get overly focused on something, we lose that open capacity and we end up in the meaning crisis because we're like, it's like looking for answers by getting closer and closer and closer to the page, or zooming in so close to a computer screen that all you can see are the individual pixels and you're trying to get a picture out of the pixels and you can't do it. So needing to kind of step back and take a wider view, um, is kind of an obvious statement, but is a difficult thing to do. I mean, do you have any thoughts on if we are, or maybe something from Vervaeke, because I'm definitely not familiar with his broader work. If he says anything on like the meaning crisis, the overfocus on absolute truth, the sort of need for everything to be very black and white, like how do we step back from that? McLuhan talks about the electronic media, like I was saying, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess with a lot of Vervaeke, there's this, embodiment. He talks about an older way of reading called Lectio Divina, whereby people in Christian societies would read the text out loud to each other, read sacred texts out loud to each other. And there is this, you're doing it with other people, you're doing it out loud. Um, and in that, people talk about having a sense of the divine in the text. So it's the senses that I mentioned, but also that they're not reading, looking for arguments to either completely logical arguments, either to refute or to support kind of logical points, building up an argument, proofs, and everything, which he thinks, excuse me, is some of what we've been doing, and which helped lead to the meaning crisis. So yeah, this sounds like it intersects with McLuhan in some way, in that the idea that in some past we were much more integrated in our environment and we balance the senses and we become much more narrowly focused. McLuhan says on the visual, and I think that there's something to that. But yeah,
Well, I'll just jump in there. I love that Lectio Divina example. I think it builds perfectly upon it because when we're sitting reading a book, um, we're not really aware of our body. We're not really aware of what's going on
yeah,
around us. We're just focused on the page at hand, and we're taking in the information, and it is building structures in our mind that we are then sort of digesting, and that
mm,
that's all that's happening, and it's all happening from just text on the page. Whereas what you're describing in Lectio Divina, you've got all of that stuff going on. So the normal pulling information from text stuff. You've got audio going on at the same time. So and vocalization. So if you're reading, you're processing it through your body, through your vocal cords, through your breath. If you're
Mm.
listening, you're taking in the information, you're hearing it. I mean, podcasts are a great example. Like people, anybody that's listening to us right now, whether it's watching it on YouTube or just listening to it over their headphones or whatever, like they're engaging in more of their senses than they would if they were to read the transcript in a book.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, in Lectio Divina, if you're in a group, you're engaged in the relational sense as well. So you're sensing the other people around you, you're aware that you're
Mm.
there, that they're looking at, if you're reading, that they're listening to you. If
Mm.
you're listening, that someone else is reading and you're paying them attention. So your sense of social attention is completely engaged in all of that. And you're approaching, if it is the Bible or some holy, some sacred text, something that has that divine divinity in it, you're approaching that divinity and trying to manifest it into the world in a way that includes, visual, audio, vocal, breath, social brain functions. And you're
Mm.
going to have a different experience of your activity when you're doing that than if you're just in a chair with a book.
Yeah.
But because of our cultural history, we're so like, oh no, it's the same thing. I'm reading it, I'm reading or I'm reading. It's the same thing. Like we're so divorced from our body that we don't notice how these things, we might even notice while we're doing it, but it doesn't occur to us to realize what a difference that engaging these other systems makes for our experience of digesting these ideas, these concepts, or bringing them to life so they can be heard again.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, no, please.
No,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so part of McLuhan's idea is that we need to be conscious of how technology is affecting us so that we can become masters rather than slaves of the process, something like that. And that's kind of what his project is kind of about.
I can't say I know enough because I haven't read his extensive works, so I can't speak to his project. I don't wanna mislead people on my level of expertise. But I do think from what I have read that is the point. He was striving to make people consciously aware of what the media they were interacting with was doing to them,
Mm.
um, rather than sort of going numb to it. He compares it to like physical numbness or Freudian repression, I think was his terms. But in either case, it's the idea being something's going on and we don't know what it is at all. We don't feel it, we don't sense it. And you can see that with new media that like for me personally, um, I am not involved in TikTok. I do not understand TikTok. I hear it's important if you want to market something that you're doing, that's where people are paying attention. You got to go on and do these little dances and point at things, or do whatever, popular. But all of that is a form of media. It's a form of I mean, look at that. That's his tribalism right there. Like I've heard of things like book talk. People get on TikTok and they discuss their books. Well, look, you have visual interaction, you have somatic interaction. You've got someone who your body is sort of subconsciously mirroring as they're engaging with the camera.
Mm.
You've got audio going on. You've got all these different things, and it's building this little world around the community of people who are engaged in whatever hashtag they're, book talk or the wider TikTok world. People are taking in this information in this way.
Mm.
YouTube is kind of a proto version of that because it's not quite so interactive.
Mm.
Um, it's more like I make a thing and then you watch it and then, maybe you write something in response or you make a thing and I watch it.
Mm.
I feel like TikTok, because of the sort of, I don't know, the remixing you can do or the passing it on, there's this sense of like the information flow is alive and shared amongst all the people who manage to catch this video, and they can take it and they can make it their own, and it's this whole community, and that builds a
Mm.
worldview, and you
Mm.
see that being used positively in a lot of ways, and you hear that being used negatively too. There's a lot of talk about TikTok cults. I was not expecting to get into TikTok. I will actually pivot this over to AI because I think AI is something I'm more prepared to talk about. I'm more familiar with that than TikTok. But I think it's the same thing. You have a lot of people who are utilizing this new media, this sort of reflection of of our mind's ability to organize words and thoughts and ideas, and having something else do that for us. Um, a lot of people using that in very productive, beautiful ways, and you have people who are caught up in it and build their own little inclusive, like not inclusive, their own little exclusive worldview where the AI is responding to them. You hear a lot of the like people who are convinced that they've developed this new form of math, or these people who are
Hmm.
like leaving their wives for their AI girlfriend because
Hmm.
it creates it creates this, especially you. I remember the guy that there was like a video I saw about a guy who was, in a feeling more happy in the relationship with the AI than he was with a person. And in the video, he's interacting with it via audio. It's the same thing. It's a social interaction. It's a media that's allowing you to socially interact with something that isn't going to question you, that's going to reaffirm everything you do. It's
Hmm.
coming to you auditorially, so you don't have a lot of built-in skepticism yet. Usually, if you hear somebody saying something and they have a certain tone, it's true. It's true enough, you know. Maybe they're trying to fool you, and you got to listen for that. But if they're consistently coming back and being like, "Yeah, that was a great idea. I think you should do this." Like, "Yeah, you're doing good." Like, "Oh, you're so smart." That's the same voice you hear over and over and over again. Our subconscious is trained to interpret that as trustworthy because if a person were treating us that way and there was no signs of them being also creepy, or AI is so sort of perfectly crafted, although it's still not human. It still has that robotic uncanny valley element to it, and I think it always will. um but our emotional circuitry is trained to respond to that in a trustworthy way.
Hmm.
And so it hijacks, we sort of allow ourselves to be hijacked by this non-existent entity that's, it's not even really there. There's no there in AI. It's just a very skilled pattern making project. It pulls from all of human history, everything that we have fed into it, so much human input, and it creates patterns out of it, likely patterns. That's all it does. And it's able to mimic humanity. It's able to seem like it's alive because everything, every single pattern it's analyzing came from someone who was.
Hmm.
It's perfectly aping aliveness. It's taking building blocks and forming this like mirror structure. I think my sister was telling me she had some sort of a idea about AI as being this sort of fluid mirror that would just form into a thing. I don't
Hmm.
want to say too much. I don't want to steal her ideas. She has good ideas.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's appropriate. Yeah. So I forget where we started all of this from, but TikTok, tribalism, yeah, I mean AI in these edge cases can be seen as sort of a tribalism of one, you
Yeah.
know. Um, yeah. And what do we do about that? Do we let it keep happening? So there's McLuhan's advice. You know, we should be engaged in the thing that you and I are engaged in right now as a society. We should be looking at this and seeing what it's doing to us and trying to at least come to some kind of understanding of it so as to engage in it in a way that the effects that it has on our nervous system are more consciously chosen. I don't want to say controlled because it's not quite that like power over because we're
Hmm.
engaged in it's an ongoing process. It's happening anyway.
Hmm.
So we can kind of steer it. We can consciously choose where it's going to go, but we can't control it. We can't, it's at best it's a horse, it's not a car. The not AI. I'm not trying to say AI is alive. I'm saying the process of the new media being something that humanity is engaging with. That's going to happen. We're not going to stop using cell phones. We're not going to stop using AI, short of a civilization crash. That's going to be a thing that keeps going. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. Didn't know I'd
Hmm.
have so much to say about that. Goodness. Excuse me.
The sort of mirroring what we have thought and what we want to be hearing or want to project someone else to be thinking of us. Maybe that's something like what we're doing when we're getting into this tribal tribe of one where an AI is kind of uh getting us attached to it is I mean reminds me of the myth of Narcissus, staring into the pond and falling in love with his own reflection. And there's probably something about attraction to our partners where there's some mirroring. We tend to be attracted to people that are some look somewhat like us. Things, people make jokes about this with married couples and everything. But yeah, I don't. I mean, I guess I think in one sense, I mean, as an individual, you kind of can manage, you have to manage things the best you can. Um, you mentioned some people getting a flip phone or, I like Cal Newport's very pragmatic ideas of not having YouTube or TikTok, not having what he says are interesting things on your phone so
Mm.
that it just helps to manage your life to not have the 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 attractions of the web sucking you in and social media and things carried around with you. So, that managing your how your space is organized helps you to manage your mind. And then,
Yeah.
of course, doing that if you have kids and if you're a school, doing that on a larger scale with the kids in the classroom and everything. And a lot of that is, yeah, like we mentioned with the Lectio Divina or other things, bringing us back to our body and existing in space. Um, I'm curious about how Marshall McLuhan thinks. So he's saying our use of technology, going from the phonetic printed alphabet, which sort of narrows us into this unbalanced, visually heavy um, experience, is going to be rectified in some way. We're going to be involved with all our senses through new media and um but yeah, you mentioned, it's kind of a maybe a nitpicky thing to say, but we're not embodied in new media. We're looking at a screen. Maybe in the future we'll have a chip in our head. But I'm sort of, or thinking Google glasses, which is sort of in between the two. And yeah, I don't, but I won't tell my opinion of that in general. But yeah, what's your sense of the how people could be optimistic about this, about TikTok or whatever comes after TikTok?
Mm. Well, one of the things I think is interesting about McLuhan, or at least one of the things that's interesting about him to me, is he makes it very clear in the interview that like if he had his choice,
Mm,
this would not be happening. He's
mm,
not a fan of it. He prefers the visually oriented. He prefers the slightly more distant kind of cooler, hotter. He used cool and hot in a way that I still don't understand. So I'm not going to get into that. But if anybody's familiar with it, know that I don't mean it the way that he means it because I don't understand it. But it's like more removed. It feels cooler to me of just like cold, like oh
mm,
distant, like not so friendly.
mm,
Um, that he would prefer it just kind of stay that way, but he's noticing the effect that this alternative form of information transfer of this alternative extension of the human nervous system is having, and he's trying to analyze it as it's happening in real time.
mm.
And so I think he does have some very I don't have them copied, but towards the end of the interview, he has some very utopian views
Yeah.
of humanity, sort of lovingly sculpting the natural world to make it
Yeah.
beautiful and then spreading off into the cosmos and
Yeah.
the solar system and then into the galaxy
Yeah.
through our sort of, I don't know, intertribal kind of a thing.
Mm.
To the extent, I think he mentioned decades. I think if he's right, he got it wrong by a couple degrees of a thousand, like I think if he's right, we're going to go through some sort of a breaking down of our old way of being,
Mm.
that will be more or less painful, the more or less attention. The more attention, the less painful. The less
Mm.
attention, the more painful
Mm.
it's going to be. And then on the other side of it, I do think if we manage enough attention to reach kind of a threshold of it, I think we've got a good shot at things pulling through okay.
Mm.
But if we all, like he said, sort of just wail and moan and go hide in a corner and say, "Oh, these things are nothing good is going to come of them," then nothing good will come of them. We kind of have to bring those old values forward into the new world if we're gonna hope for them to continue. Because if we let them stay in the old forms, um, like if we, I was just having a conversation about this with a friend of mine in the UK over email. But this idea of like in the world nowadays, you have sort of this conservative, leave us the fuck alone, so sort of localized in that way, anti-globalist kind of a sense,
Mm.
um, that tends to run more traditional and more religious.
Mm.
And you've got this other side that's more cos. I mean, this is obviously a vast generalization,
Mm.
but if we're going to generalize, this is, I think, a fair one to make. On the other side, you have people who are more, Um, we don't need boundaries. We don't need barriers. We can both be very global and open, and we don't really have to worry about God. Like none of that's like that dogmatic morality doesn't apply to us and all of that. And that you have this sort of separating. So here we have that tribalism happening, right? But we're stuck with this sense of, the the sacred being left in these old forms because the new forms are growing, but we're not bringing the sacred forward to meet them. And I think the way we do that is those of us who are concerned with the sacred do our best to stumble our way into how to engage the new world and bring that along with us so that we're not stuck in just the old ways. We may have to go to them and we may have to approach them humbly and acknowledge the truth that they carry and sort of be inducted into their mysteries. But then we have to be able to bring that forward. We can't let it stay purely isolated, purely conservative, purely the way it was before, because our view of the sacred in that sense is the distillation of the past world in McLuhan's terms, the sort of the visual, the more removed world, like that built the structure and has evolved the sense of sacred forward to a certain degree. Clearly, it's not doing very well because of the meaning crisis. That's sort of one level of the meaning crisis is what it means. Is that's what one level of the meaning crisis is.
Mm.
Um, but that world is falling apart, and so that world's connection to the sacred is falling apart, and the new world hasn't built a connection to the sacred yet. So we're forced into this false dichotomy of like, do we hold on to the thing that's trying to die because it still connects us to the sacred, or do we give up on that and move into the new that has no connection to the sacred? And people are stuck in the middle of that, and it's very painful, I think, for people who care about both things, the sacred and the present. And sadly, the only answer is like we have to make it up ourselves, or we have to engage in that retrieval and that allow that death and resurrection process to happen. We have to let these old forms die and new ones be reborn. I mean, oddly enough, maybe not oddly enough, what's coming to mind, and there's a line from the Gospels, of Jesus. He says something along the lines of, "You can't put new wine in old bottles." And I think that's exact the old bottles being the old forms, the new wine being the new sacredness that's coming. We can't we can't just empty out the old stuff and try and catch like the whole thing that is falling apart is falling apart. If we want new wine, we need new bottles, we need new forms and new functions to hold it in. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Vervaeke focuses a lot on that. And as far as like a return to religion, renewing of sacred practices, a development of meaning that is relevant to today as opposed to only the past. I mean, I don't know if you can say more about his view on such things.
I don't know that much, but yeah, the general outline you gave, I think is right. I mean, he has a vast knowledge of old kind of religious or philosophical, spiritual kind of practices and regimes, and yeah, it's trying to help renew those things now by talking about maybe how they've become sort of empty or decadent nowadays, or yeah, just trying talking about them, bringing them back, participating. He does meditation, he does Tai Chi, he does all kinds of embodied kind of Jeep form, or all sorts of stuff, sorts of bodily communal kinds of stuff. Play. He's very big on serious play, which I think is tremendously promising.
Mm. Yeah, he was like, that's just I wanted to hear more. That sounds great. I mean, that's I'd never thought about the sort of embodied relational playful element of like martial arts training because it always
Mm.
seems so serious, but I think
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
really good point. And yeah, I mean, before we got on the recording, you and I were talking about both of us being a little cabin fevery, having been in the house
yeah,
sort of on the computer, needing to be on the computer for work and other reasons all day.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm not very embodied right now. I have some sense of play just because some of the stuff I did today was quite fun. Shout out to poetry workshops, Feral Angels, um, Tom Hirons. Let me drop my proper names here. But you know, I've still been sitting. I haven't been embodied. I haven't been out in the world. I need to go for a walk. I need to get out in some sunshine. You know, I need to engage. And when I do, I want to engage all of my senses. I mean, we've
Yeah.
talked in the past about how nature is, I think it was the Rousseau episode, but how nature is sort of refreshing. And I
Mm.
think in light of what we're talking about now, it seems very clear to me that nature is the container that holds us in our gestalt balance of the senses. And that if we go out to nature and present ourselves like I know for me, if I go out into nature, I present myself to like I'm in it. Very often I'll feel kind of removed. Like, oh, that sunset's really pretty, but I feel like I should be feeling more. Or like I'm up in the mountains and I'm like, wow, what a view. That's cool. Maybe I'll take a picture, but I feel this distance, right?
Hmm.
That's to me, that's a sign of how visually in the McLuhan sense, my mind has been shaped. So
Mm.
I go into nature. Nature's designed the wind on my skin, the sound of the wind in the trees, the sound of the birds, the crunch of the stones under my feet, the smell of the river, the
Hmm.
smell of the pine needles. You know, it's alive. The reason the tribal people had you know, generically speaking within this particular thing. But the
Mm.
reason that lifestyle is a balanced gestalt is because they're in nature all the time, and nature is designed to stimulate all of our senses in a balanced way. Like this planet is designed to create a balanced being, and we have unbalanced ourselves through misuse of the media. And then when I go out into nature, my experience of nature is one of a very visual, an overly visually oriented person going into a place that stimulates all the senses that I don't have facility with. So if I can remember that and go out into nature and purposefully choose to consciously engage with the smell and with the feeling of the evening air and the sunlight and how that tunes my body and tunes my circadian rhythm even of like, oh, the light and the time of day, and how do my emotions feel in response to, you know, the longer shadows or or as the cloud passes over the sun and darkness falls briefly. This should like how does that hit me? And so on and so forth, you know. I feel like we can build ourselves back up in a better way, and then we don't need to fix it through media because the media, you know, TikTok, like you were saying, yes, it's nitpicky to say, or I got you were reflecting back that I was nitpicky about
Hmm.
television and the internet and computers and audio. Like, yes, it's kind of engaging everything, but it's not really engaging everything. And you're right. Um, it doesn't. It does more than the visual, but it's still unbalanced. And it's really only when we're out in nature um, or we're with people and that sort of, I mean, you know, playful, interactive kind of a thing. All of those things. I mean, I have to wonder if that's why sex is such a moving thing because it engages so much of the body and the relational, you know, it's kind of everything all at once, very instinctual. Um, yeah, and all of these things, you know, sex, nature, the sacred, Lectio Divina, they're all ways of our experience of the world becoming enriched or having a more rich experience of the world and considering that altered state, considering that, you know, something special or unusual when really it's just our birthright. It's a more balanced, it's a more holistic, it's a more integrated engagement of ourselves with the world
Hmm.
and how to go about achieving that in a way that isn't constantly constantly strengthening one thing and then strengthening another thing and then trying to get them all balanced all together one by one at a time. Like we need to do them all together as a whole as best as we can. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, nature is very renewing. I think there's also ways of being in artificial environments in a natural way as a human. Although I think the nature is also essential. But outside nature is also essential. You mentioned, yeah, being with other people. I guess that's what made me think of that seems to be the way we can try to talk about how new media maybe connects in some way, just trying to see how reasons for ultimate optimism about new technology um, in terms of connection. Yeah, I have all these built up thoughts about how it's not good and that how I guess my worldview is more like you accept, you compromise, and you do what you can to stay kind of bodily embodied, a natural body mind in the world. And yeah, you use technology in way, Google scheduler or emailing or etc. And moving around in a car or whatever. um but you kind of try not to be, yeah, captured by the technology, kind of even little things like parking far away from the store, or yeah, not using Google Maps sometimes or something like that. You find some way to compromise to where you're not captured by, but you're using it in a way that, which I think is a good use of technology to enable a better life. At least in the world we live in now, it's better that I have a car, so in the house that I live in, it wouldn't take me 3 hours to get to the place that I have to go to get money and, et cetera. I don't know, you know, but
Yeah, yeah.
do you see a way to, you were talking about the idea of going into this new world with all this new media and this technology and bringing the sacred to it. And I could see how with Facebook groups or through watching a YouTube video, you can start to make a connection, but then you want to ultimately do it with the body, meet up with people in real life or something like that, use the tech. But do you see a way to kind of, or what are your thoughts about this? Yeah, I'm at a loss a little bit as to what is truly there to be optimistic about. I mean, I'm not saying we should totally accept things and be and influence AI in the best way we can. There's many things with that, many possibilities, good and bad. But yeah, we should do the best. But and maybe in a way, it doesn't matter what we end up imagining. It's more important to do the best where we are at, and that includes not, yeah, retreating and not also being captured by and sort of going full blast or something. I sort of am suspicious of that sort of way of embracing too much to where there's idea of embracing it and using it in a balanced way, or there's maybe you're being captured by it and sort of this heady forward motion or something. Anyway,
Mhm.
I said a lot, but yeah, what do you think about the optimism or the
Yeah.
bringing the
I like,
sacred? Mm.
yeah, sure, sure. I wasn't sure if you were, you were gonna,
Sorry, no, I'm
no,
yeah,
no,
I'm
it's all good.
halting.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, I'll start with one of the earlier things you said of like, just to kind of lay the groundwork for my mind to chew on this. But, you were talking about like, oh, well, you have to have a car because you don't want to take 3 hours to have to get to work every day. Um, and yeah, I think that speaks to the fact that like our world maybe got a little too involved in the car as a media and built an entire, society around being able to use it.
Hmm.
And now we're dealing with sort of the consequences of everybody having 1 to 2 cars and what cars do to the environment if the pollution and like if you know all that stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so like, and it's not like if you believe at least some of the conspiracy theory, it's not like people weren't trying to move to electronic cars or other things earlier, and there were structures that held back such things, or maybe not. But there's which is all just me trying to say that like I don't mean we didn't try, and we're probably better off than we might have been if, for example, we didn't have the DEQ inspections on the cars. We didn't have the smog inspections to make sure that our environment is cleaner. If we were still burning, coal or whatever. Um, so 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 there's that because your comments about because obviously if we had a choice, like I imagine you would prefer to work at a place that you could walk through a forest to get to and be there in like a reasonable amount of time. Like that seems like it would be pretty lovely if it was a safe forest and it was nice. Like nobody wants to be on the expressway for 30 minutes getting cut off and getting angry when you could be, you could just go for and we have the technology and the ability to arrange that if we wanted to, but we don't necessarily believe that we can, maybe. Um, but all of that to say that when it comes to an optimistic view of the future with these things, I think you're very right to be wary of the sort of, ooh, this is great, and just kind of like diving headfirst into it. Um, there's nothing inherently wrong with diving headfirst into it, except to the degree that you lose yourself in that. And I think that's very easy to do. That's why I don't think it's good to dive in. It's not inherently wrong, but we're not really capable of doing it the right way. Most of us, myself included. Um, and I think that the the thing a lot of people want is like, well, what do I do? What's the choice that I can make or the action I can take that will make something that will ensure a better future, you know? or a better, a more sacred version of these technologies, sort of to use the language we've been playing with so far. And I think of like, I think of like recycling. Like recycling was supposed to be the thing you could do to save the environment, and whoops, turns out it's harder to do than we thought, and it doesn't seem to be doing much to stop a lot of the problems we're having. So I can understand the despair, and there's definitely reasons to be concerned, but you also can't formalize a response. You can't say, if you do this, good things will result. And this gets into complicated territory for me. I'm not quite, I know what I want to say. I'm not quite sure how to say it. It's something along the lines of like, the only thing we can really do if we want to try and make the world a better place is, as far as I can tell, is to be a lot more aware of the intentions behind our actions. So like if we if we engage in the new technology and we don't notice how disembodied it's making us, um, in that moment, there will be a moment where something pings us of like, oh, I don't feel good. Something doesn't feel good, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and we can take actions that ignore that, say that bad feeling doesn't matter. I'm going to keep like, oh, just go away. I don't need to worry. I don't need to worry about it right now. I'll worry about it later. Um, and that this is really heady stuff. I don't know. Anyway,
Hmm.
that creates like that's us putting a stamp on the world of whatever this problem is. I don't need to deal with it, you know? And so the intention in our engagement is, well, let me engage in this so I'm distracted from this problem. Um, Other times we might engage in something that's like, oh, I'm going to do this, but it's not really going to work. Or, oh, I'm going to do this and like that'll show those fuckers or something, those people. Like it's actually very hard to catch our intentions because oftentimes they show us rather unpleasant things about ourselves. But I think if we can pay more attention to them and take actions from a place of trying to make something genuinely better for ourselves and other people. Um, that's the one place I think that we have real agency, that we have a real chance of because it's not like, oh, if everybody just thinks happy thoughts while they throw their garbage away, like the world will get better. But honestly, if you're thinking happy thoughts all the time, you're going to notice what a mess it is. Like, I frustrating myself here. I hope I hope people are following me better than I fear they are. Um, but there's something about when we engage with something with a good intention rather than with a focus on our intention being good rather than with being worried about what the outcome is going to be. I think that's important. If we can focus on our intention being good and continuing to act from a place of good intention, we build a virtuous cycle in ourselves. And that can build a virtuous cycle in our activity, and that can ripple out and build a virtuous cycle in the world. And if enough people are able to sort of start on that ground level of like, what is my intention in this action in this moment? Like even right now, it's tricky for me. What is my intention in speaking right now? Like I'm not really paying attention to it very clearly, not as much as I could. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm a little more aware. There's a sense of like wanting there's a good intention there of wanting to share some level of insight that it feels important to me that people understand because it might make the world better. And I'm speaking in a way to try and put one little pebble on the scale of good things happening in the future. There's also, wow, I really like the sound of my own voice and I have really good ideas. And isn't it just pleasant to hear me talk and like, oh, it's all this, it's so nice. Like, there's that. There's, hey, I'm hanging out with my friend and like we have good conversations and I'm not thinking about other people and I'm just having this conversation. I'm trying to serve the conversation.
Mm,
Um, Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's not a good thing. I want to be entertaining. I want a lot of people to watch this so that, your viewership goes up and people start coming to my website and I can make some money off of that. And that's not bad. But then why do I want to make money off of it? Is it because I just want to like, I don't know, do things, buy things or get drunk or go party or get to just not care about my life or because I want to like which would be a bad intention. Not caring
mm,
about life is a bad intention, generally
mm,
speaking. Or
mm,
is it because like I want more people to come to my website so that my newsletter so that my newsletter takes off more so that it can start sustaining me and I can use that sustenance of my newsletter to sustain the forwarding of these ideas that I think are going to be helpful for society to the best of. So all of it's sort of boiled into, am I you use it boiling into a machine or a mechanism to generate this virtue.
mm,
And if I'm doing that, that will have a positive effect and it will hopefully reach out to more and more. Um, but there is the danger, like I said at the beginning of this whole thing, of being too caught up in results. And if we are too caught up in results, in other words, oh, it has to work out the way I want it to work out,
mm,
or it has to work out a way that like it's supposed to be this way. This is how it's supposed. Maybe not even I want to, but like, oh, if I don't have like 100 new viewers every week, then it means X, Y, Z. It means I'm failing. It means something's
mm,
bad or wrong.
mm,
Um, at that point, it's really tricky because it's very easy to keep doing the exact same behavior with an 180-degree different intention. Whereas first you were like, oh, I was like, oh, I want to get my ideas out in the world. Oh, it's starting to grow. Oh, no, it's collapsing. I have to do something to grow it again.
mm.
All of a sudden, I'm focused on, I just have to get people in.
Yeah.
I'm not, if I was focused on, am I delivering good things? As long as I'm delivering the best things I can think to deliver, that will at least make me feel I'm doing the best I can.
Hmm.
And that will that will build on itself. And I will
Hmm.
feel better about myself in my life. And that will have an effect on the people around me. And regardless of if anybody ever reads my writing, or many people read my writing, or if it ever takes off or not, I'm building something good for myself. But as soon as I switch it and say, oh, but I need to have these people reading, or I lose my ability to say something good, I've put my intention is no longer to say something good, it's to get people to pay attention.
Yeah.
And it's completely opposite. And then you have bad results. And even if it works and it grows, maybe you don't have the best results, or maybe you're coming at it with a little bit of a mix of the two. And so you have some good results and some bad results. But I think the only thing we can really do is continue to engage in our lives as best as we can, turn up the attention, pay attention to what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're doing it, be very curious about it. Don't try and change any of it because it's already happening. So if you try and change it, then it just becomes this like painted over thing. That's very vague, but
Mm,
anyway,
mhm,
it becomes reactive instead of a genuine
mm,
expression.
mm.
And just keep trying to express genuinely. Keep trying to do good in the world and be a good person. The more people who actually do that and don't equate, a certain number of followers or going to church every Sunday or some set formula with equating with, therefore, then I am a good person. If you just engage alive in the moment as best as you can as a good person, um, you ensure a better future. So as part of being a good person, I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, attention and intention and not being too focused on the results. But yeah, I think maybe attentive to the results and kind of, you know, that's important. Yeah, and what you were saying about, yeah, maybe you start something with a seemingly good intention, but you start becoming obsessed with the results. To me, that seems maybe a way that the hero can kind of become a villain, which I think is maybe a myth of our time. The hero becoming the villain, famously in the Christopher Nolan Batmans, and they use that phrase too. It's interesting, maybe how it's kind of self-conscious. Those movies of the hero drama and everything. But yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Um, so what does that mean in terms of new media, just giving it some concreteness? I guess you started to outline that a little bit with just what are we doing with this podcast? What are you doing with your newsletter? Um, and then the implied, what are we doing with the rest of our kinds of things that we do, the organizations and even practices and things. So in terms of the big boogeyman, maybe TikTok or AI, I mean, does it maybe mean kind of engaging a little bit with TikTok? I don't know if anybody noticed, but when you were talking about, or I think this was on the podcast about marketing on TikTok, or you doing silly dances and everything to get viewers. I was sort of rolling my eyes or something like sigh, inevitable kind of thing if one wants to be successful in this new media world, but sort of I'm hoping not to have to engage in. But I'm a little more open now that we're talking about it and just wondering, yeah, what does that mean? For me, the first idea is almost making a TikTok video, knowing that TikTok is hugely viewed, especially with young people, so that hugely viewed to me as very with the attention how it sort of seems to ruin your attention span, shorten it, shorten it, shorten it, and it's already shortened by TV and then YouTube and stuff. But then also with doing that to young people and sort of forming their when their attention span is still forming. And Rousseau talks about how not to have that happen, how attention span shorten and everything. But for me, the first thing I thought of is just, okay, if I engaged in uh, TikTok, it would be maybe to try to insert something good in that sort of what I imagine as this fervid world of constant scrolling, through these tiny little videos and everything, to get them off of it and to sort of maybe make them self-conscious. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. There's so many different facets to what you're saying, right? So one level you can look at it on is like there's a problem with TikTok of it shortening attention spans, and we need to pay attention to that. It's a fact enough. It's evident enough that it's, at least if not black and white fact, it's very gray. It's very dark gray. Um, so what do we do about that? It's happening. Uh, if they ban TikTok, which doesn't seem to be much on the table of discussion anymore, but it was a big thing a few months ago, if I remember correctly. If they ban TikTok, like something else is going to come along. Like it's not like the people, before TikTok, there was what, like Vine, Snapchat, there were a bunch of like short little
Mm,
video things, YouTube. I mean, every social media is now trying to imitate TikTok. So if TikTok goes away or
mm,
we decide, oh, it's bad, like the media is still having its effect on our nervous system.
mm,
The effect in this case being shortening the attention span.
mm.
So what is our intention there? Do we intend to face that fact first of all, or do we intend to ignore it? Ignoring it isn't going to get us anywhere. because it's happening. It's just it's refused. It's wailing in the corner, like McLuhan was talking about. It's so he says, no, be arrogant, go up and kick these media in the electrodes, like just show them who's boss, right? Okay, so great. How do we do that? I have no idea. Your suggestion of sort of joining into the flow and of the new media development and trying to inject some form of um, countercurrent to it, some whatever that might be. It's not like you could start doing hour-long TikToks and challenge people to like sit and watch this whole TikTok. That's not how it's set up for.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know, maybe, I mean, but here we are. Here we are having a good intention. Here is this thing that we have discovered is potentially a problem. What is our, how do we're choosing to relate to it. What's a good way to relate to it? Maybe going on and saying, hey, I mean, this is cheesy as hell. This is a rough draft, right? I
Hmm.
shouldn't be doing this in public, but I'll do it in public for the sake of illustrating the process, right? That you're
Mm.
asking about as it's presenting itself to me.
Mm.
Um, like going on and saying something like, "Hey, like TikTok challenge, go watch a 44-hour podcast nonstop. Don't distract yourself. See if you can do it."
Mm.
Um, I've heard there are TikTok challenges. People, I think they call it raw dogging a flight, which means you go
Heard
on
of
an
that.
airplane and you just no media whatsoever. And like that's great because that's the TikTok world, assuming it is a TikTok challenge. And forgive me if again,
I think you're right. Yeah.
I'm not on it, so I could be wrong. But if it is a thing, like that's the world itself trying to regulate it because it's recognized, the users have recognized the problem. They recognized, hey, this is a good tool. We don't want to let it, so we have to do something to balance it on the other side. What's great, a flight where you just sit and you're bored,
Mm.
and you maybe a better thing to do rather than sit and be bored is sit and be bored and engage in your other senses. Do
Mm.
something beyond. Pay attention to your body and its placement in the world because you lose that when you're focused on the screen or the phone. Your whole
Mm.
body freezes. Focus on feeling your body. Focus on
Mm.
it relaxing.
Mm.
Maybe get on TikTok and do somatic focusing exercises to get people more into their body and do a whole series of those. That might be a thing. I know a guy who I will not name out of fear of everyone jumping on his Facebook page, but I know a guy who um, he's in the Gurdjieff work and he has in the Gurdjieff work they talk a lot about intention. What is your aim? And one of his aims is to go on social media and post like genuinely quality spiritual content, not his own thoughts. 99% of the time, it's quotes. Occasionally, he'll have a little commentary on the quote. He'll say something interesting. But he's just bringing that content. He's recognizing the format and the world of Facebook. He's
Mm.
bringing in something genuinely sacred into that world and he's placing it there. And he does that like I don't know how many posts. Yeah, I don't know if he's on Facebook all the time or if he's just like he's an older guy too, but he just does it. He just does it. It's a consistent aim of his, and his is one of the only pages that consistently shows up in my feed because I'm always liking his stuff because it's always very insightful. I feel like he's really tuned into the moment somehow. He's able, like, he'll post something and I'll read it and be like, wow, that speaks to this example right in my life. And then the next day,
Mm.
wow, that one does too. And it's not
Mm.
like he knows my life. He barely knows. He's
Mm.
liked a few of my comments, so he barely knows who I am. Like, I don't
Mm.
care.
Mm.
I don't need him to know who I am.
Mm.
Um, but like, all of that aside, like he doesn't know who I am, so his commentary isn't about me, but he's tuned in. He feels like he's tuned into some sort of rhythm, and he injects that into the world in that way because he's done the work over the years to sort of generate himself that good field in himself, and he's
Mm.
applying that to this new media landscape without having the media landscape capture him.
Yeah.
So he's able to kind of hold his center and engage with it in a way that then the goodness that he's generated becomes a generative force. And now he's like scattered throughout my Facebook memories. So if I ever want to be like my memories from this day and I scroll through, I've probably got like one or two posts from him,
Mm.
because of his efforts, he's impacted my life in that way. And all he does is use Facebook. From his perspective, he reads something, he likes a quote, he saves it somewhere, he puts it in, I don't know what his process is, but that's something he's been doing for years and years and years. And like, talk about holding a good intention in your attention and taking action on it again and again and again, having probably an unintended. positive effect. Like I don't know if he knew how it was going to turn out. I'm sure he's not focused all the time on how many subscribers he has or whatever, you know. I just don't get the feeling that that really matters. I feel like the whole thing kind of irritates him, if I'm honest. If I had to pick something about like his flavor of response, but he continues to do it, and it makes my world a better place. So I'm grateful for it, and I think we could all do something like that, but it has to be on the terms of the world you're going into. So if you go into TikTok, you don't want to be that like stereo like here I'll pull a meme, right? It's the Steve Buscemi meme with the skateboard over his shoulder of like Steve Buscemi, the old man, being like, "Hello, fellow kids," like trying to pull off that he's, cool and young and stuff. Like you don't want to go into TikTok with that kind of a vibe of like, hi guys, I'm gonna come in and tell you how to not have your problems. Like you have to meet any world you enter into, you have to enter into that world on its terms
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
genuinely sort of whether you're going back in time to resurrect the sacred or you're going into TikTok to try and engage with the youths. Um, you have to meet the world on the world that you're entering on its terms, and then once you create sort of a respectful relationship with it, and you don't lose yourself in it, and you don't lose it to your vision of what it's supposed to be, you're not projecting onto it. Then you can start to generate some good intentions because you know the environment, you know yourself is still present, and you can start to do something good in that way. But again, you have to kind of go into it without an intention of how it needs to look or how it needs to be or what the results are going to be.
Hmm.
Um, the intention is in the action. Um, what am I, where am I coming from? Am I coming from a place of trying to generate hope? Am I coming from a place of if I generate hope or if I don't generate hope, that's not important. It's where am I coming? What am I intending to do?
Hmm.
Um, I think that even wording that can kind of get you in trouble, but um, I don't know. I won't. I'll stop at that point.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that like other things you want to bring that ineffable, complex wisdom to it. Um, and you can't exactly delineate what wisdom is, uh, in the abstract, or I don't think you can, but yeah, you should have that when you, when you're doing anything, including, acting on new media. It's, I think, one criticism of religion, especially fundamentalist religion, effect on people is that, and I got this from Vervaeke, that people think it's good enough to be good or to want to be good or, to love. Um, but, without wisdom, those can lead to bad things or less good things or terrible things, especially in the case of love. I mean, look at romanticism or, many, literature points this out, how your love can lead you, and police detectives know love often leads to murder. So, yeah, for posting to media, I mean, the person you mentioned, that posts mostly other people's quotes to his Facebook, I thought one thing that does is he's taking himself out of it for the most part. And that's actually something that I try to do with my media use, even with this podcast, to not, I notice many podcasters kind of get very personal in a way with their audience. And I think that is facilitating this parasocial kind of intimacy that's not a real, it's a one-way kind of intimacy. And I'm very suspicious of that, at least in the sense that maybe it's like pornography in that it fulfills you instinctually in some way, so that you're not looking for it in your real life in a truly, fulfilling and renewing and interactive kind of way. It's a little bit like junk food. It's fulfilling your hunger, it's giving you some calories, but in the end, it's not making you healthier and not connecting you with the world very much, even. Um, and yeah, I like that. So he's using social media in a way that's not feeding into this narcissistic self-advertisement, which I think is a terrible kind of thing, a weakness that social media can facilitate in people. This narcissistic self-advertising and trivial interaction, where people used to complain about Facebook because it was finding out about the meals that people ate. I'm not saying that's always bad or something like that, but I just sort of generalizing, it's sort of getting your attention on the less important, more menial kinds of things, and less on the maybe more important things. It's using Vervaeke's kind of language, is things that are very salient but not relevant to life.
Mm.
So they capture your attention, but they're not really leading to better life.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's great. I think what I see you pointing to there is the same, or at least the way I parse that is it's the same question of intention, right? So like let's say just to use the food posting on Facebook, for example, right? Like, wow, I'm in this restaurant and they delivered this meal to me, and that just looks amazing and that's beautiful. And like I got to show people this. This is something else. Like, and there, my action there is coming from in joy, and it's joy of the food, of sort of this marveling at this artistic presentation, or just the way the light's hitting it, or something, and a desire to share that joy with other people. And you're like, oh, snap, it's great food at this place, guys. Send. And you
Mm,
don't think about it because you've shared things, and that's great. Um, and and then let's say you get a lot of responses and everybody's like, oh, it looks great. I really got it. Thanks for the heads up on that place, whatever, whatever. And even the very same person could be like, oh, wow, I got a lot of social validation from that post.
hmm
I need to do more.
hmm
So the next time they go out to eat and they're like, hey, look at this thing.
hmm
Entirely different intention.
hmm
At that point, or if somebody else sees it and they're like, oh, that person got all these likes and I should do that. So I'm going to start posting the
hmm
same pictures.
Yeah.
Their intention is like, oh, that is a popular formula. And if I ape the formula, I will receive the same results.
hmm
But the core part of that formula is that person was very excited by the thing and
hmm
shared it in a joyful moment. And if you share things in that way from a place of appreciation, they build in that good way. And you can try and mimic that. But if you're coming from a place of bad intention, even if you're successful, it's not going to make you happy. It's not going to build that virtue. It's not going to build that sort of like better world that we're all trying to build. It's to reinforce that I need to engage in a formula to get social approval, because if I were just to share my joy and excitement the way that person shared their joy and excitement about that meal, nobody's going to like my joy and excitement. My joy and excitement doesn't belong. So you're re-energizing that belief about the world that what you genuinely care about doesn't matter by doing things in a formulaic way of like, oh, this is going to guarantee me a result. I don't have to genuinely engage in the world. If I were to genuinely engage in the world, I wouldn't get a result, and therefore I shouldn't do it.
hmm
But if you're not genuinely engaging from a place of like what feels good for you to do, um, why are you doing it? Really? I mean, it's because you hope in the future you hope that it will get you something that will let you engage in the world in the way you want to. But if you just start off right now, it's going to be messy. It's going to maybe not look like you want it to look, but the more you do that, the better you're going to feel about yourself. And then that opens up all kinds of doors. And we can't even see where that's going to lead us, but it's definitely going to lead us somewhere better than trying to loop into a formula that's just going to guarantee something without us needing to pay attention or be involved with our own
Mm,
emotions.
mm,
Um, and then that brings us back to embodiment and emotions and a
mm.
more felt sense of how to engage with these things. Are we feeling genuine? Is this genuinely us? And we don't even know. I think a lot of us sort of have this sense of struggling for identity, which McLuhan predicted.
I think you steelmanned the argument well, that of the good sort of use of posting food to social media, and how that is much better than trying to ape that action for in order to try to get the superficial result of all superficial, like on apparent on the surface result of people responding with emotion and connecting with you on in some way, and thinking about you, and you know and maybe renewing in some way the interaction, giving you something where you later talk or email or uh, uh, spend time with, to build on. um, I do think though that there is some caution to be said about uh, the action in the first place of posting the food to social media, especially when we're already living in the world of social media, where we've seen that as a thing to do, as a genre of behavior. And that may corrupt. Corrupt is the way of saying it, like if it's a negative thing, or influence is maybe more neutral. When we later go into a restaurant carrying a camera and internet connected device in our pocket, even for posting for a few minutes or for a few seconds, or taking a picture and posting, which takes a couple minutes at least, you're already getting outside of the environment, or outside of the where you are in nature. You're not, maybe the waitress looked over at you, or I mean, what about who you're with anyway? If you were not by yourself and you were ignoring them for a minute, or you could talk about it, but it's still, yeah, I still see it as being kind of a virtual kind of interaction. And it's hard for me to see it as not taking away a little bit from the embodied kind of experience. And I
Mhm.
would emphasize maybe the mystery of, yeah, having a meal that no one knew about, or maybe in a smaller way, you can share it within a phone conversation, or in a personal conversation, or in some way in describing it later on. Um, yeah, I guess one thing is, there is what you mentioned, the intention of sharing is genuine and felt. But those things also are conditioned by the, you know, by the environment, or by the social media itself. Not saying it's always bad. There's kind of, I think there, maybe we both, I do return to the sort of sense of balance. And, my sense of balance now is going to be different from 10 years from now. But yeah, I have this idea of the sense of balance where, yeah, I live in this social media world, and I don't use it very much. I mostly output, not input. Um, and I'm not that conditioned, and I do keep myself from the impulse of kind of taking pictures or things like that, because when I'm in the real world, because I think that maybe takes me away a little bit. Anyway, I do have this sense of controlling it, or of moderating it is probably a better way to say it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Well, I think if I can respond to a couple of
Yes,
the points
please.
you made, I think like really. what the sort of dichotomy you're setting up is a it's a valid one. It's a good one. I don't want to say like I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong here. Um, I will say that I think you can very much engage in social media without it becoming this sort of pseudo social world. And I think there is a danger in engaging with social media and having it become the pseudo virtual world. And you are right to be cautious of that. Um, you can kind of succeed in either case, or you can fail in either case, right? Success and failure depends on, again, on intention and attention. Like, are you actually, why are you doing it? And are you paying attention to whether it's, what it is and how it's happening? You know, are you paying attention to the feedback? So, you know, you, in choosing to sort of moderate your social media use in that way, like that's awesome. That's great. You're paying more attention to the effect this technology is having on you. You're choosing the way you engage with it instead of having it dictate the way you engage with it. And like you're hopefully getting good results. In which case, great. It's neutral, you know, but you're engaging with in a way that's building a better experience for you than if you weren't paying attention to it. If you weren't trying to understand its effect and sort of ameliorate it and work on it. Now, if you were engaged in it and you enjoyed doing it and you wanted to do it and you were just, oh, this is great. I got this great group of people on Facebook and they, you know, it feels really good, blah, blah, blah. Like that, then going out and taking pictures and sharing them, like you get this social hit that feels good. Maybe they're people you know that feels good. Um, if you end up with 100 million followers and you're inundated with likes all the time, and I mean, I don't think either of us are in danger of this happening, but if if that happens, like, oh, that will be a moment of suffering. You'll catch a moment there of like, all these people, I mean, you hear about you, this is almost a cliched story at this point, but like, oh, all these people are liking me, but there's nothing genuine here. Like you're confronted with that virtual unreality of the social media world that you are choosing to distance yourself from. In that moment, can you accept that information? And like, are you attentive enough to note like this other person that's gone the opposite route from you? Do they notice their life feels empty? What do they want to do about it? Do they pay attention to it? Try and change the way they engage in social media? Be less concerned with followers and more concerned with genuine output? Do they decide, no, this whole thing is toxic. I want nothing to do with it. And then now suddenly they're overdoing the same thing you've been doing all along? You know, that's all good. Now, if someone were to take your point of view and just be like, "Oh, I'm not on social media at all," and like, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with an example of like how that can also go wrong because it can, because everything, like in every moment, every decision you make will kind of fall one way or the other. You know, it'll be sort of a sort of in a positive way, or it will be sort of in a less positive way. Um, and um, it's really the choices you make and how you respond to what the world's presenting you with that decides um, what kind of, I don't know, what kind of results you get, I guess, or as far as like what kind of world you live in and how you engage with it, how it engages with you. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I mean you can take either approach to it and neither is necessarily bad. But each of them requires sacrifices in that, like, you know, in your case, you're limiting your opportunities for connection and discovery and all the things that social media promises. which, they control more and more and they're less and less rich, but then other things will pop up to kind of make up for that. And on the other hand, if you're going into social media, then you are running the risk of being sucked into this virtual world, and you have to sort of compensate for that. Um, I think a better example of sort of the downside of yours, one that's a little more clear, is like what you were talking about with the car. Like if you were to not use the car, you would have a much more complicated life. But if you use the car, then you got to deal with the fact that you're adding to pollution. You got to deal with the fact that by needing to park where you work, you're contributing to a cement block that does not grow anything beautiful and just sort of absorbs heat and becomes this sort of heat sink in the world, and it's dead, and it lacks beauty. Um, yeah, it's just comes down to not really being able to, like I said in the beginning, kind of having to, the only place that you have a real impact is on the intention behind your action of engaging with the world the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. So yes, I mean, certainly intention in using technology is important, and then staying attentive to how it's what the effects of it are, both on yourself and maybe on the world, is important. Yeah, and you're trying to be genuine. You're uh, trying to be for the good in many different ways. Um, but I think we started with this idea that technology itself has certain effects based on its nature. Uh, and Marshall McLuhan has this kind of analysis of society and uh, uh, I mean, the effect of technology, certain technologies on it, especially alphabet, the phonetic alphabet, and then the printing press, and he has, and we mentioned how he's kind of optimistic about the ultimate sort of effect on society of new media, TV. And even though he died before the World Wide Web, he's seen as sort of a prophet of these new technologies. And because they will help us to become more sort of embodied, use all of our senses in a balanced way rather than just the visual, which the phonetic alphabet does. But so there's the two different things that we're talking about: having intention and sort of being practical and doing your best and paying attention to your life and the effect. But also there's the technology itself. And I'm kind of trying to straddle those both. Yeah, like with talking about social media, or you know, Facebook and things, maybe it has this sort of, I mentioned this self-advertising kind of component, and yeah, I wasn't saying not to use it or something, but um I was trying to talk about how it kind of affects people at scale. And yeah, I do see it, there's a, like any other technology, there's this possibility of it, yeah, connecting people in real life, or in good ways. But then there's also a lot of the effect is to kind of, as many people have talked about, to trivialize people, people's minds, or and then of course engagement comes from, a lot of engagement comes from people arguing and getting really political and things like that. So, but yeah, I don't know. What are we? I'm
Mhm.
still a little bit at a loss as to what we're what we're going for here.
I mean, to be fair, I think I am too. I had sort of an idea of what to talk about this episode, and it's becoming clear that I was not clear in my intention, perhaps, or maybe I was a little too broad, but we'll see. I,
Mhm.
I like what you're saying about sort of bridging the gap between the attention and intention thing, and then this sort of pervasive effect that social media has on us, because like ultimately, what control do like any of us as individuals have over it, unless we're, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or whoever's running these things. I don't know who that would be for TikTok, but whatever, just to kind of touch on all the things, and even them, like, they can do certain things, but they can't necessarily stop it entirely. Um, they can skew things and they can break things maybe, but they can't, technology is going to continue on. Um, so like we're not going to stop using smartphones. I think I may have already said this in this episode, but we're not
Mhm.
going to stop doing these things. So you and I can stop doing them, and we can develop a life of meaning out of not doing them. And if even just in our local environment, people become aware of that and they see that. And I know you said you weren't talking about not engaging, but I'm just using us as an example of this sort of extreme view. Like, then that'll have an effect on some people, and that may ripple out or it may not. But um, if we don't make some kind of conscious choice in how we're engaging with the fact of social media or technologies unfolding, then we're at its mercy. And I feel like that's what that quote we started with, from when we started, the quote from McLuhan that I pulled, of like, be arrogant and go up and like attack the media, like kick them in the electrodes, like kick them in the nuts, whatever you want to call it. Um, to not to not let the fact of how social media is affecting us as a culture happen to us, to not be victims of the process, um, but rather to be consciously engaged in a process that we can't control. Ultimate, we don't, the same way Vervaeke's talking about like ultimate truth, like we don't have ultimate control. And we can't ultimately control any of these things and the way they're going to affect us and what they're going to do to our nervous system. We can't, there's not a switch we can throw that's going to stop TikTok from doing what it's doing to people's attention span, but we can notice that that's happening and we can choose how we want to engage in it. And I think the more of us who notice a problem, whatever the problem is, whether it's technological or political or social or whatever, if we notice a problem and we consciously choose to engage with it to whatever degree we feel safe, it can be tiny. I'm not saying we go out there and lead some sort of revolution. I'm not saying we go out there and literally try and find a house for every homeless person that's on the street. But if we notice that there's a problem and we take some action in response to that problem, we're already creating a better world than if we hadn't taken that action, because there's one more person whose attention is on the problem and who is actively trying to attend to it. And enough of those people over time will build a flow of attention around the problem such that the problem then, you know, gets resolved. It gets sort of the clump of it gets washed open, and it meshes in better with the way reality is. I mean, that may look like enough people getting sick of the fact of what TikTok's doing to their attention span, that everybody abandons the platform. I mean, it happened with cigarettes. They were ubiquitous, and enough attention and messaging went out of like, hey, these are killing you. They're very bad for you, that socially they became less and less acceptable. And now like people smoke, but It's, you're not smoking on airplanes. You're not, it's vastly different. So social change can't happen in the other direction if enough people, I mean, even environmentally, if you talk about like when you and I are growing up, there's this fear of the hole in the ozone layer. And some people nowadays will be like, well, they warned us about that and nothing ever happened. And the reason nothing ever happened is because enough people took it seriously. They put their attention on the problem. They realized what the problem was. They took some steps to resolve it, and we managed to resolve it. And now there's not a hole in the ozone layer. And like we did something about it. So, what it took was people noticing the problem and attending to the problem and intending some better result. So I think that's where we sort of straddle the two is like we don't try and change, we don't try and negate the problems of social media. We accept the reality of them and we have an intention to do something positive about them. We take steps in that direction instead of saying, "Oh, it's hopeless," and we need to either stop social media, we need to stop AI, we need to stop cell phones entirely, we need to stop TikTok because it's doing these things, um, and instead be like, "Okay, it's doing these things. What does that mean, and what can we do about it? Can we ameliorate it? Can we get people more in their bodies so TikTok doesn't shorten their attention spans, or is it hopeless?" And in which case, like, oh wow, it's hopeless. We need to stop. We need to do something about it. But we need to crank up that awareness so we're actually not just reacting to some sort of projected idea.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's what we've been saying.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think maybe we've reached a good stopping point, but I
Hmm.
still don't. The Marshall McLuhan seems to be, you know, optimistic about the end point, but I don't. And I don't, as I said, I don't think it's necessarily that we see that. And maybe he's just presenting, you know, maybe he's kind of presenting an image of a good future. Like you mentioned, he did use kind of utopian language at the end of the Playboy interview, which is sort of this Schopenhauer Nietzschean kind of Ayn Rand too in some way. This artist as the last man of, you know, there's this ultimate artist of reality kind of thing, which, you know, I'm kind of a little pessimistic about that image. I sort of think that's like the romantic image that can lead to a lot of kind of, you know, violence, bad stuff, totalizing kind of ideology to control everybody. But yeah, yeah. Um, I
Well,
agree that, you know, you don't want to be too pessimistic, and you want to be practical and wise and accept whatever's happening in your life with whoever you are to use the technologies well.
yeah, I'll say one last thing because I wasn't I think I understand better now what you mean by like sort of the optimistic future of it. Um, because I think you're right that this projected ideal of how the future is going to be is often results only in um sort of the opposite, sort of a lot of violence, a lot of destruction, a lot of that. And there you have a case of the intention being one of forcing the future to be a certain way. Because you're convinced that if you can force it to be a certain way, then it will be good. But you're not focusing on actually being good in the moment. It's a subtle distinction, but I think it's important. But what I will say is that to my mind, the less we can try to picture what this good future is going to be, the better we are. Like the most optimistic outcome I can think is if enough people get together and try to attend to our problems in a serious way, um, that it will, well, it will lead to some sort of experience that we need to have as a species. But we can't pre-decide what that experience is going to be. I think most of the positive changes that came about in the world required people to work for them. They don't happen of their own accord. But I think the people who are working for them are just as surprised as anybody else at what the outcome is. That we get the best results when we allow ourselves to be surprised. Um, we take good actions with good intentions based on a true an acceptance of what's true about the world. We don't turn a blind eye to it. Um, and we leave the results of our actions up to God or up to reality or up to, you know, um, if we try too hard to pin them down ahead of time, then we run the risk of mistaking the structures we're trying to pin down, the results we're trying to achieve as the goal instead of simply trying to bring something good into the world in this moment. Not for the sake of it leading anywhere, but just for the sake of bringing something good into the world repeatedly, moment after moment, as best as we can.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I pretty much agree with you there. And we'll kind of find maybe continue to talk about this in the future.
See where it
And
goes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, man. It's been a weird one today.